Hi everyone, and welcome to The Climate of Sport with me, Claire Poole, the podcast where we explore how the world of sport can drive climate action, champion equality and shape a more sustainable future. From the boardroom to the locker room, from grassroots to global stages, the game is changing and so are we. Let's get into it. Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the Climate of Sport podcast with me, Claire Poole. Totally delighted to be back with you again and coming into your ear holes again for another episode of the pod. What I want to chat to you about this week is green games. The reason this has popped up as a topic is because this weekend, on the 21st of February 2026, Spanish football club Real Betis hosted a green game against Rayo Vallecano. The result on the pitch was 1-1, but off the pitch, let's say the result was awareness raising around environmental sustainability. Sorry for the terrible pun there of the on the pitch, off the pitch, but you get what I'm saying. So I want to share a little bit about the game, some other similar games and what it's all about. For those who are in the industry, a green game is going to be pretty second nature for you all. But for those who are listening outside of the industry, a green game basically is a more recent phenomena in football and other sports where a regular season or a special match takes place where sport clubs use that match, that moment, to highlight environmental initiatives and connect with fans, with players, with partners and sponsors around environmental sustainability or climate action. So the way it takes place is that with a little bit of publicity ahead of time, and then the operations on the day of the match are really putting a focus on those different environmental sustainability angles. So it could be encouraging sustainable or public transport. It could be giving away free transport and travel, highlighting recycling points, doing things like bike repair workshops we've seen, providing more sustainable or plant-based food options, and using the moment basically to do sustainability activations in and around the match or through broadcast around environmental sustainability or climate action. Not totally recent phenomena. We can see sort of sustainability green games for the Olympics going back into the early 90s in some ways, but also in elite sport back to the early aughts, to be honest. NBA Green Week in 2009 was where we started seeing some of this happening, where the league at certain times of year when they had this Green Week held auctions to support environmental efforts, sponsored hands-on community service project, featured special encore apparel, etc. That happened for a while and then dropped off, and then we've seen another rise of it more recently. So a big example probably was or the biggest sort of recent example was in September 2021 with Tottenham Hotspur versus Chelsea match. It was supported by Sky, the Premier League, and was aligned with COP26, the climate conference, to host the world's first net zero carbon football match. So that was around a lot of sustainability activations and then offsetting any unavoidable emissions. That was probably in recent times the biggest moment, certainly here in Europe, that we saw an example of this match that was associated with sustainability, or in this case, net zero. There are loads of other examples. Arsenal and Southampton did a green football match in 2022. Their focus was a free park and ride service for supporters driving down to Southampton for the match. They did a wire fish sculpture to promote and collect supporters' single-use plastic for recycling. They gave out wildflower seeds to young fans on arrival to the game, did lots of promotions on vegan food as well to provide incentives for people to try them. Loads of other examples, but going to the next year in cricket, Edgbaston hosted a Go Green game for its international match against New Zealand in September 23. So again, this was to highlight the green credentials that the stadium had undertaken 12 months previously and had reduced waste, looking at locally sourced produce, rolling out its low energy LED light project, introducing e-cups that prevent plastic. Another example in 2024 in rugby, the Bristol Bears versus the Northampton Saints at Ashton Gate. That was the example that I gave at the beginning around things like bike repair workshops and free travel happened at that game. And then last year, 2025 in basketball, the Portland Trail Blazers hosted their annual green game against the Washington Wizards at the Moda Center. That was all about waste reduction and circularity via their Rip City reuse programs. They did a jersey exchange, e-waste collection drive, tree planting, a raffle to support environmental leadership. So We've seen loads of examples of these green games that are happening, and I want to share a little bit about a couple that have happened recently and then talk about the pros and cons of green games. So the reason I'm talking about this at the moment is because of this Real Betis green game that was hosted this weekend in February 2026. The slogan for the match was "Green living starts in the neighbourhood," and the first team wore a special kit made in part from orange peel fibres. So connecting the jersey with the tradition. Of course, Real Betis is a club based in Seville in Spain, very, very synonymous with oranges. We've seen a lot of these special kits being happened, haven't we, in recent years? So Forest Green Rovers making them out of coffee grounds and bamboo. We obviously see a lot of food kits coming from recycled plastics. And now this is a new kit made from orange peel fibres, so connecting tradition, that local identity and sustainable innovation as well. And I've been lucky to visit Real Betis and go to Seville, and the orange trees that line so much of the city, and like you can smell it, it's in the air. It really is synonymous with their brand, as well as bringing in a sustainability angle, which is great. And they actually had t-shirts, this club shirt that incorporated the numbers on the shirt with a scratch and sniff technology that released the scent of orange blossom. So creating a sensory experience as well, which is very cool to bring innovation in. The players used reusable bottles during the game, very visibly to stay hydrated. At halftime, they brought in a really renowned Spanish freestyler who showcased ball skills in front of Betis fans and participated in an orange challenge, which was all over Forever Green social media profiles that involved juggling an orange with your feet, which is an incredible image. I can't imagine juggling an orange with my hands. So God bless these incredibly talented people. On the food side, for the first time, some ingredients from their local organic garden was included in the menu at official matches. So bringing in organic, locally sourced produce to the game. Face-to-face surveys were conducted with fans. So we talk a lot about using games to collect data and understand what the fans care about and how we can connect with them more closely. So they used the game to do these surveys about healthy and sustainable eating. So that's really interesting as well, to use these moments as a data collection point. Orange peels were donated for composting. So again, giving second life to stadium materials through reuse initiatives. And then what's very interesting as well is there's Betis a part of this Clean Air Champions League, which is a European funded group of football clubs and associations in EU countries to help understand the air around stadiums, help to connect with fans around clean air initiatives and measure the local air quality. So around this special green game, air quality was monitored to ensure that it wasn't just a one moment element, but actually was feeding into wider projects as well. So the club calculated the carbon footprint of its new stadium during the event. So again, collecting data and using these moments to drive progress forward, which is very cool to be able to use that for a green game. Another green game that happened quite recently in November 2025 that I wanted to mention, because all the green games I've mentioned so far have been played at an elite level, but also to show that this is happening at a community level as well. So Cricket for Climate in Australia helped support the organisation of a green game between Prospect District Cricket Club and Glenelg District Cricket Club in Adelaide back in November 2025. And again, this game was about bringing these clubs together to compete on and off the field. So they did runs for trees because 855 runs were scored. So they planted 855 trees. They did gear donations, can and bottle donations. They tried to support low emissions transport to the match, put a focus on sustainability for catering, and solar energy powered the event as well. So even at a community sport level, these incredible green games can happen, and an amazing opportunity to raise awareness of what clubs and organisations are doing. So just to finish, are green games a win, or are they a reminder that these activities should be the norm at all matches these days, but aren't? So in my opinion, green games are incredibly useful. They create focal moments. They make sustainability highly visible. They attract media coverage, and they can also create clear narratives that fans connect with and remember. I think these specific activations, like either encouraging or incentivizing public transport or recycling e-waste, they're a moment that fans can connect with, and they can also provide a testbed for clubs looking to roll out new initiatives. So again, we mentioned there the Bet is the Fan survey. It can be used for a moment like that, which makes sense in a joined up way. Maybe your organisation's thinking about using reusable cups. You could trial it at a green game or compostable packaging, etc. So there are massive opportunities around green games. I think the risks come in where a green game takes place and you risk tokenism if you are not, as a sports organisation, taking action more broadly. So a really successful green game is going to highlight activities that happen season round and aren't just a symbolic moment that is unsupported by that systemic change, because we know that that systemic change is absolutely critical. So if you're not doing the, let's say, boring but important back of work house around sustainable procurement, or moving to a renewable energy provider, or trying to reduce your transport emissions, or taking care of your waste in the most appropriate way, because we know energy, transport and waste are the biggest environmental impacts of most sport events. If you're not doing that, but you're doing a green game, you are obviously at risk of accidental greenwashing, because you are showing, yes, the activities that you're showing at that green match stand for themselves, but it also gives the impression that you're doing a lot when maybe you're not doing as much behind the scenes. So this idea of accidental greenwashing is a big topic at the moment. Sport Positive actually is a partner on an EU-funded project called Garfield, which looks at sustainable reporting and overcoming greenwashing. So we'll be putting out more information about that and how you can avoid it going forward. Not a massive risk for green games, but just something to be aware of around it. So the last thing I'd say about a green game is, one of the big things we want to do is connect with fans on these issues. And obviously, we know from a psychology perspective, if we are to truly change fan behavior, then repetition around certain behaviors is required. So it's really cool to trial something, and that innovation and testbed pilot project is cool. But if you are looking to change fan behavior around some of these topics, consistency is key rather than a one-off moment. So the bottom line for me is, a green game alone is incredible, but it can be symbolic. Year-round sustainability in some cases can be invisible. So maybe your club's doing amazing sustainability work, but a lot of it's behind the scenes. So an absolute win, an incredibly powerful combination, is bringing these two things together. Use these moments to really highlight the projects and the activations that your club is doing year round, and use maybe one weekend initially to try and bring fans and sponsors and partners along on the journey with more activations. But one should be not at the detriment of the other. Bringing these two things together can be really, really powerful. So a lot of football examples there. So a great segue into today's podcast guest. I was fortunate enough to spend time recently with the incredible Hayley Ladd. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So we are incredibly delighted and privileged to be joined by Hayley Ladd for this big play interview on today's episode of the podcast. So a lot of you will know Hayley Ladd as a footballer, now playing for Crystal Palace and Welsh international as well. Some of you may or may not know that Hayley is also an MBA graduate and is experienced across the top 3 divisions of women's football. So it's amazing to welcome Hayley, and today we're going to chat all things women's football, environmental sustainability, leadership, which is like the theme of this series of the Climate of Sport podcast, getting the athlete perspective, which is incredible, and like thoughts on the path forward in all these areas. Hayley, welcome.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Such a pleasure. So you've been a footballer unbelievably for nearly 13 years across 3 divisions of English football. You've seen women's football go through massive changes. You've studied academically at the same time, which is always unbelievable to me. People who work and do studying at the same time, like what a commitment, which is incredible. And you're still out there playing at the highest level. So I'd love to start off to hear what the ride's been like. Tell us a bit about you, your career, a bit about the football, and then also I'd love to hear where this care and voice around the environment came from as well.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the most standout thing for me is I can't believe when I was kind of 17 that women's football would explode in the way that it has. I never thought that I could be a professional, even for a few years, let alone for over a decade, like you say. So I think that for me is just amazing. And I think every day how kind of lucky and privileged I am to play at a time when women's football is at such an exciting time. So I think, yeah, probably having that, I don't know, humble beginnings in terms of obviously the sport has probably prompted me to do more education, be aware of other things, and obviously being professional doesn't mean that you're paid loads. So I think at Bristol, for example, I was had maybe 3 or 4 coaching jobs at the time when I was, 21, 22, and loved being out in schools and working with young children as well, and kind of, yeah, just working on other areas of my life and, yeah, enjoying it as a whole thing, really.
I love it. So then, have you always had this affiliation, sort of care for the environment? Did that stem from a moment, or has it just been like a cadence of, sort of background and just something that came to the fore more recently?
Yeah, I think it's just something that comes naturally to me. My dad is a big influence on me, and he's always been really keen on recycling. He kind of meticulously washes all his plastic and things, and he's really just careful and considered with how he utilizes and uses products and things. So it's probably kind of in the background, but I think for me, naturally as an adult now, it's something that feels, yeah, just right to continue and to take into my profession and working life and try and just do things that I can to improve football in the way that it maybe interacts with the environment too.
Amazing. So I'm going to ask you some more about that. But first of all, like in this series, we've been asking all of our guests a fun fact that people don't know about you. So is there anything that springs to mind that you think people might not know this that's kind of fun?
Okay, I've not actually spoken about it in any interviews, but when I was younger, maybe about 16, 17, obviously a lot of people in football do a lot of coaching, but I actually qualified to be a referee and did a couple of years refereeing local games. So it's probably, yeah, funny now to think about it. When you see me on the pitch, I'm usually in the ref's ear more often than not, kind of. But yeah, it's nice to have an understanding of that role. And yeah, it was tough with those parents shouting at you. Honestly, I do not take the job lightly.
Oh my God, I love it. So you've been on the inside, so you kind of know how far you can push them and when to step away. I love it. You've got like the inside track. That is brilliant. I love it. So people know you more now because of that. And like also I think that's indicative as well, ref, fairness, like the stuff that you are trying to put, do in your wider career as well. It makes sense to me now that you've said it, which is very cool. So you mentioned there about sort of the environment and like looking after the game and the game's progress. So what does that mean to you beyond the pitch? We know what looking after the game hopefully means on the pitch, but sort of beyond the pitch, what does that mean to you in terms of looking after the game and the women's game especially?
Yeah, I think it always comes down to sustainability. It's been a key topic in the women's game over the last 5 years, where we've had this influx of investment, but people are worried about how maybe women's football clubs are obviously quite associated with the men's clubs and obviously those funding streams. So the sustainability aspect of making sure that people can play football, how the grassroots accessibility is there, obviously in terms of pitches and having, yeah, it being affordable basically to be able to start football and play football and continue to thrive within the sport. So I think for me that's big in terms of pitches and also opportunities in terms of funding and kind of things like that.
Yeah. And you actually did your thesis around this, right? So I think you were at Man United, you were playing for Man United at the time, and you spoke to them and the Premier League more widely. So tell us about what you did your thesis on, and then I've got a couple of questions off the back of that, but just so we're clear on sort of the topic that you've covered for your thesis.
Yeah, so as part of my MBA with Longford College, I did a thesis which took a sort of broad view of environmental sustainability within the Premier League. And with me being a player at Man United, it was sort of, yeah, it was nice to kind of focus on Man United as a case study and kind of delve into the reasons and the kind of greater understanding of things there. So yeah, it was a really interesting and kind of eye-opening subject. I think there's obviously a lot to be done within the Premier League, but there's also there's such a complex landscape at play that I did understand why it's difficult and why progression within the field sometimes does take a bit longer. I think I had some really interesting interviews with some really innovative ways in which we can encourage progress. And I think that just dawned on me that we can kind of be a bit more creative with it, take a few more risks to try and encourage clubs to do things differently. And obviously some clubs are, I think maybe Man City and Brighton are 2 Premier League clubs that come to mind who are kind of associated and affiliated with certain partnerships commercially, and that seems to really have taken them in a different direction. But in terms of Man United, obviously Old Trafford, which I kind of looked at a little bit at the time, spoke to some people concerning the facilities at Old Trafford. And it was the time where a lot of people were discussing whether they should keep Old Trafford or move to a new stadium. And yeah, I was sort of maybe emotionally a bit tied to Old Trafford. It's such an iconic stadium. I loved
Yeah.
playing there. But actually there was things like even the kiosks where you get the food and drinks for fans, they couldn't actually install the kegs for soft drinks and things. They had to have the plastic bottles because of the infrastructure and the confined space there. So yeah, with obviously a lot more of those examples, you realize that certain things have to be in place, and obviously they've decided to plan this whole new stadium. So yeah, it was really interesting, and yeah, just looking at trying to, from a governance perspective, promote things, but also from an incentive point of view, and kind of make things exciting, and make clubs kind of compete to be the best in the environmental sustainability world as well.
Yeah, well, that resonates with us. Obviously, the work we did historically on Sport Positive Leagues, so kind of we used to get feedback of like, isn't this is too important to compete on? But actually, there's so much collaboration, and you can't take competition out of sport, right? Like often there's so much collaboration as well, but like that competitive vibe can help. So I hear you on that a lot. So you've qualified now, and you've got your MBA, which is incredible, and then you've also got this role as a champion for Football for Future. And you've told me in the past that you've kind of joined webinars with special guests alongside other athletes, and then you connect to chat about using your platforms more effectively. So for those of us who aren't professional athletes and aren't in these groups, give us the inside track, like what resonated with you, what ideas have you come up with, like what happens in those athlete discussions?
Yeah, it's an amazing program that I've actually only joined recently, the last few months, but it's one thing that it's just, yeah, it's been amazing to be part of as group of players. I think there's maybe about 20, 30 on the program, but coming together from all parts of the world, from men's football, women's football, academy football as well, all just discussing kind of ways in which we interact with the topics within our football clubs, and what kind of initiatives clubs are kind of getting behind, and which ones we're maybe struggling to kind of advocate for, and kind of, yeah, just share solutions really. Like you said, we also had guest speakers come in and maybe do a little bit of information given about the topic, just so we can understand it to its kind of best degree. And also, like Sport Positive, you've got these amazing companies which are coming up with these innovative ideas and ways in which players, fans, clubs can compete to try and kind of really boost that progress, and kind of come up with new strategies.
Yeah, love it. It's going to take us all, right? So that's very cool. And kind of there's so much I want to chat to you about, Hayley, because you've seen, your career has been part of, I guess, what we would call like a bit of a golden era now for women's football, especially in the UK, and the growth and the evolution of the women's game. But you, while still being very young and youthful, have been around enough to, long enough to see that evolution before that as well. And I know you talk about the women's game as a chance to carve its own path. So what, in terms of the changes you've seen and that path, what do you think it looks like in an ideal world from your perspective?
I think it's just prioritizing the subject whilst the game is growing. Like I spoke about with the Premier League clubs, it's almost difficult to kind of go back in time and, I don't know, change the kiosk size or whatever at Old Trafford. It's about doing it at the heart of the program. I think when you've got clubs like London City Lionesses building new stadiums and building new training grounds, you can really, kind of, yeah, get to the heart of the issue, and really implement those important strategies from the get-go. So I think that's really exciting from an infrastructure perspective. I also think the way in which the women's game is growing at the moment in this country, you do have a lot of one club ideologies where you have obviously the men's and women's side. So I think that also gives us a really unique opportunity to collaborate with both teams and with the academies, and kind of utilize sharing of resources, of facilities at the training ground, for example. It's something that's quite common now for women's and men's teams to brush shoulders every day, and to work alongside each other, and share resources. Or I know clubs or teams are quite protective of having a particular schedule. We must be on the grass each day at 10 a.m., for example. But I think whilst protecting each other's schedules, I think you can also breed this really positive, collaborative kind of one club philosophy where yeah, you can utilize the same resources, and also socially it's so positive to have these clubs and these teams working alongside each other and sharing solutions and just collaborating on a really positive level.
Yeah. And looking back, can you see, have you got memories of like how far that's come in your career?
Yeah, definitely. I think I probably have had 95% really positive interactions with other teams. But yeah, I think probably about 10 years ago, there was times where I think the organization wasn't there. So when you're sharing facilities, you do need to have time slots and it has to be quite regimented. But times where we
Mm.
would walk into a physio room, which was a shared space to fill up water bottles, but because another team were in there, then they weren't allowed to kind of fill up water bottles. And it was just really clunky. And it just gets people's backs up, I think, when it's not organized in a way that is really streamlined. So
Yeah.
yeah, kind of handful of examples like that. But more often than not, I've had so many great kind of chats with, I don't know, under 16 boys teams and
Yeah.
staff members from the men's team and said, how was your result of the weekend? Great. And you kind of had this such healthy chat where I think socially there is sometimes a bit of a divide between men's and women's sports. So I think at the heart of the elite sport, if you have got that collaboration and that just really nice interactions every day, it really does
Yeah.
breed elite sport as well as kind of socially being really positive as well.
Yeah. And that social element goes beyond the players and the teams as well, doesn't it? Like they being having been to so many women's games, like the atmosphere is so different. It's so incredible. I was lucky enough to go out to the Women's World Cup 23 in Australia and like just such an incredible atmosphere. In terms of the game evolving and things changing, do you think it's going to be possible to like keep some of those, or do you think it will naturally evolve into something different? Do you have a feel or a hope? I guess you can't see into the future, but what would you hope in terms of the evolution around the attendance and fans and the vibes around women's football?
Yeah, I think it's something that's really positive about the game. I think I'm always kind of quick to circle back to I think the standard of the football is so good within women's football. I think even though the experience is so positive and it's just a lot more inviting to kids and families and kind of to anyone really, it's super inclusive. I think also the product on the pitch is really positive as well. And I think I just want to encourage anyone who loves sport to kind of get involved with women's sport and women's football in particular. Because in terms of a timeline, when I was at my academy football at Arsenal, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago, we were training once or twice a week. And I think now when you go to the academies, the kids are training 4 or 5 times a week. They're doing extra futsal sessions, skill sessions. They're in the gym. So yeah, I think from a timeline perspective, people are really happy and really loving women's football at the moment. But I think it's just going to carry on going, yeah, in obviously the same trajectory. So I think, yeah, obviously the environment and the experience is amazing, but also the product is super good as well.
Absolutely. So it's a really optimistic look forward, right? In terms of where the women's game's heading, or is there trepidation in some areas, or are you just like, we're on the right tracks here now, things are moving and we need to keep the momentum? How do you feel?
Yeah, I think so. I think there is, from an inside player point of view, maybe we are kind of sheltered a little bit from the kind of the difficulties. But in terms of each year, there's more opportunities, there's more contracts being offered, there's better wages being offered, the facilities are getting better. The viewership for the league seems to just be getting better and better. So from that point of view, it seems amazing. I think there is maybe question marks over the sustainability element of the league. I think in terms of the way my kind of my sphere and my say like home friends who not even into football, the way they're interacting with the sport, I think is really positive. So I hope that the viewership just keeps going in the same direction. I think it will, to be honest. And yeah, I think the more the game grows, I think the more people that we can kind of get through the door through into the stadiums and really seeing it live as well would be really positive.
Yeah. So one of the, I mean, that point around like the growth of the women's game in football in the UK, but also women's sport more broadly, I wrote a piece for Forbes, which we spoke about, and I quoted you in that article. It was one of like that year, it was like the biggest read article that I wrote. It was like I think tens of thousands of people read that article, and the fact that how the growth of the women's game is a win for like people, planet, and profit for investors and stuff. There's female players especially are so in touch with, especially environmental sustainability, which helps our bigger effort in some cases, not all, obviously, not across the board, but in so many more cases, perhaps. And then the investment of the trajectory of growth of the women's game, providing really strong investment returns for sponsors and stuff. And it just really is wins all round. So we'll put a link to that as well, because you can get more sound bites from Hayley on that. That was fab. So just more personally, like you're still playing at a really elite level, you're studying, you've got your own project, you're doing this, training and education, connecting with other athletes. How do you manage all of this, Hayley? What's your personal hack of like, you're obviously really, really productive, you've got loads going on. Where's your happy place? How do you avoid burnout? Like, how do you take care of yourself?
Yeah, I guess it's something that I've just been interested in a few different things. So for me, I feel really stimulated when I'm playing professionally and obviously giving my absolute best on a probably physical and kind of competitive front every day. But then to caveat that and cut through it with some reading or a bit of studying is something that I really enjoy. And yeah, it's so satisfying to be hopefully involved in some really positive projects where you feel like you're making a difference. I think sometimes with football, it can get a little bit insular and you feel like, am I really kind of, I don't know, kind of progressing things around me? But yeah, so this gives me an opportunity to do that. And obviously, speaking about environmental sustainability and learning more myself, hopefully I can become a better advocate and kind of just keep progressing the voice and kind of keep just not, well, yeah, maybe banging the drum and just hopefully on the inside in terms of elite sport, making sure that, okay, there are a million plastic bottles in that fridge and you could just copy the next person and do it, but maybe, just carrying around a sustainable bottle, for example, is something really easy you can do and kind of it benefits everyone.
Yeah. So my last question, this is, it's so interesting chatting to you. And my last question, I guess, is around that the advocacy, the self-expression. I think it's something we've seen in men's game and men's sport evolve. And now I think as women's sport is we're achieving high levels of investment, getting to nowhere near, but sort of moving towards parity. And there's much more support around it. We are seeing like fashion and self-expression and personality becoming much more visible now in the women's game, which is exactly how it should be and absolutely brilliant. How important do you think that is for women players and the growth of the game overall to connect with the people on the pitch in that way, just to finish us off?
Yeah, I think you can see from the men's game, there's certain clubs who have really championed that fashion and kind of individualistic element of the game. And I think it's had such a positive response. Being a fan of football in general, it's something that I find really interesting. And I think the WSL, they're trying to think of an innovative ways to kind of shape the game and market the game as well. So I think that is probably something that they'll look to maybe do. I think the NWSL, the Women's League in America, have done it really well, and they do kind of almost little kind of fashion shoot before the players go into the stadium. So I think it's something really interesting, and I think any time in sport where we can kind of look at things differently or try different things as a fan and as a kind of a receiver of stuff, I think you can really get behind it, and it's just really interesting. And hopefully with the women's game, we can really champion that too and kind of showcase the amazing personalities and kind of fashion senses and styles that people have. I can't say that I'll be part of that cohort there, but no, I'm really excited to see some of my colleagues strut their stuff, I must say.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us. I think it's been fascinating to hear, it's incredible to chat to top flight current professional athlete around this topic, because we know the athlete voice is so important in terms of the awareness raising and the impact that can be had. Athletes, of course, being the sort of the voice of our time, we know. So it's amazing for you to take the time and have a chat to us. It's been incredible to chat a little bit more and hear more from you. And yeah, I really, really appreciate it and looking forward to seeing what's next for you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've really enjoyed being part of the podcast. Thank you.
It's time for the quickfire round. Bigger crowds or better pitches?
I'd say bigger crowds. I think the atmosphere you get from a big crowd is, the best.
Love it. Train or team bus?
Train.
Nice. Okay, why?
Just as a player, you can just move around. Sometimes on a bus, you're all squished up against each other and it's smelly and not fun.
I love it. I'm ruining my own quickfire rounds by asking for more information. So get back, Claire. Shorter showers or shorter team talks?
Shorter team talks. I hate a long team talk.
Love it. Jazzy, big, bold sustainability pledges or boring but real action?
Boring but real, I think.
Third kit, stylish or pointless?
Pointless.
Who's harder to change, fans or football administrators?
Football administrators.
Love it. I love the honesty. This is what we're about. And then a final word. What is one word that you would use for the future of women's football?
Exciting.
Yeah!
Here we go.
That is a wrap on this episode of The Climate of Sport. If this got you thinking, send it to the group chat, send it to your team or someone who cares about the future of the game. Follow, subscribe and join us next time, because the biggest wins aren't just on the scoreboard, they're out there for the planet too. See you on the next one.